So when we think about moral blindness, we usually think of it as a personal flaw, right? Like someone is just a bad person. But what if that's not it at all? What if it's an architecture, something that gets built piece by piece right in front of us, often with our silent permission?
Okay, let's kick things off with this really powerful idea from the Bhagavad Gita. Now, this is so important because it completely reframes what action even means. It's telling us that action isn't just the stuff we do, it's also what we say and, crucially, what we don't do. What looks like just sitting on the sidelines, well, that can be one of the most powerful choices you make. And that idea, that's the key to everything we're about to unpack.
Yeah, so at its heart, this is a story. And it's a tough one. It's about how good people, honorable people, can stand by and watch something awful unfold. And even worse, convince themselves that by doing nothing, they're actually taking the high road.
And this whole story kicks off thousands of years ago in an ancient king's court from the epic Mahābhārata. But here's the thing that's so fascinating and honestly a little chilling. The blueprint of that room, it still exists today in places you and I see every single day.
All right, let's set the scene. I want you to picture this. We're in the grand dice hall of a place called Hastināpura, and we're about to witness a moment of public humiliation so profound it's gonna light the fuse on a catastrophic war.
So here's the rundown. A queen, her name is Draupadī, is literally dragged into court. Why? Because her husband just lost everything, including her, in a completely rigged dice game. In front of this entire assembly, she's mocked, she's shamed, and she's threatened with being stripped naked. Now, the guys doing this, the villains, they're obvious. But the people we really need to pay attention to, they're the witnesses. The respected elders, the wisest men in the kingdom, just sitting there, watching.
And right there, that's the real puzzle of this whole story. It's not why the bad guys were bad. I mean, bad guys do bad things. The question that just echoes through this entire epic is, why did a room full of good men do absolutely nothing?
And this is where it gets really interesting. Their failure wasn't a sudden evil impulse, it was hesitation. They got lost in these incredibly complex philosophical debates about what their moral duty, their dharma, was in this exact moment. All while a woman was being assaulted right in front of them. Their intelligence literally became a shield for their inaction.
In this whole scene, it perfectly illustrates what our source material calls the architecture of blindness. See, this isn't something that just happens by chance. It's a structure. It's something that is actively built.
So what are we actually talking about here? Moral blindness is this condition that gets created when you have a mix of three things: indulgence, performative speech, and just letting wrongdoing slide. It creates an environment, a bubble, where injustice can happen right out in the open. And notice those key words. It's an environment. It's a collective problem, not just one person making a bad call. So how do you build this thing? Well, according to the text, it stands on three main pillars. First, you normalize indulgence. The high-stakes game, the thrill, the spectacle, it all becomes normal. Second, you start rewarding empty speech. You value clever arguments over actually doing something. And third, you start to mistake silence for being neutral, thinking that by not taking a side, you're somehow staying pure or safe.
And this is so important to get. In that courtroom, dharma, moral duty, doing the right thing, it wasn't missing. Everybody in that room knew what was right. But it was suspended. It was put on pause for the sake of what? Order, hierarchy, comfort. They basically traded courage for comfort.
Okay, so let's pull this out of the ancient world and bring it right into today. Because that dice hall, it wasn't a one-off historical event. That exact same pattern, that same architecture, it's alive and well in our modern world. And when you start looking, the parallels are, well, they're pretty unsettling. Back then, the indulgence was a high-stakes dice game. Today, it's the endless scroll, the constant stimulation, the play of our digital spaces. In the court, they used philosophical debate to sidestep action. Today, we have endless commentary, hot takes, and arguments, all without any real-world intervention. And the result? Humiliation as a public spectacle then, and online shaming packaged as content now. It's literally the same structure.
And this isn't just about the internet either. Think about financial markets, right? Where real harm to real people gets boiled down to just numbers and charts on a screen. Or our whole spectacle culture, where exploitation gets repackaged as entertainment or content. Heck, even on a deeply personal level, think about addiction, where one person's indulgence creates this huge, crushing burden on their entire family. These are all modern dice halls.
So what's the common thread through all of this? It's a system where indulgence pushes out restraint. where talking about a problem becomes a substitute for taking responsibility for it, and where the systems we live in actually reward us for being detached, for not feeling the consequences of what's happening.
Okay, so we've been talking big picture, systems and stuff. Let's bring this all the way down to something super personal, something we all do every single day. Talk. I want to look at gossip, judgment, and the really subtle karma of our own words.
This quote from the source material is a real mind-bender. Karma does not measure who deserved it, it measures what you generated. Whoa, think about that. It means our words aren't just opinions floating in the air. They're actions, they have energy, and what we put out there comes back to us, whether we think the other person deserved our judgment or not.
And this leads to a really crucial difference we have to understand, the difference between discernment and judgment. Discernment is healthy, right? It just says, you know what, this situation isn't right for me, and it lets you walk away. It releases you. But judgment is different. Judgment says, I am better than this, I am morally superior, and when you do that, it entangles you. It creates this energetic tie to the very thing you're looking down.
So, how do we deal with this in our everyday lives? Well, the source gives us this really practical idea called karmic hygiene. It's basically the conscious practice of choosing words that lift you up and release you instead of words that drag you down and entangle you. It all comes down to pausing and asking a couple of simple questions before you speak. Is this necessary? Is this kind?
Okay, so this brings us to the end. And this is where we turn the spotlight away from these big, ancient stories and point it directly at ourselves. The final question is, are we watching silently?
You know, it's so easy for us to sit here thousands of years later and judge the men in that courtroom. Of course it is. But the source material doesn't want us to do that. It invites us to ask a much harder, much more uncomfortable question. What would I have done in that room? And that really leads to the final and maybe the most important question of this whole explainer. When you look at your job, your family, your online communities, are we sitting in a Dice-Hall right now? Because ultimately, the source reminds us of something so simple and yet so powerful. Every word is a seed. Some of those seeds grow into clarity and connection, and others, well, they grow into these tangled weeds of misunderstanding that we have to spend years trying to undo. The real challenge for all of us is to be conscious of what exactly we're planting.